The multiverse of Magic the Gathering is vast and unexplored. In other traditional media, a multiverse is often used to describe a universe with multiple variations, an infinite number of worlds, maybe even the same world, all with different timelines, different histories, and different fates. In a multiverse where everything can and has happened, what would some of the biggest events in MTG look like if they just played out a little bit differently? Let's ask the question, what if? Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Aether Hub. I'm Simon, bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. I have compiled hundreds of hours worth of content on MTG Story. Complete histories of planes, legendary creatures, great overarching storylines, everything one would want to know about Magic's multiverse. But today, I want to step away from the objective canon of MTG lore and explore the realm of what if. Surely, in a multiverse as vast as the one in Magic the Gathering, there could be parallel existences in which events of history have played out differently than what we saw in the game's lore. It is this concept of alternate histories I want to examine in this What If series. And our first topic is one I know you'll all be really excited for. I know that because I constantly see it pop up in my comments from you, the Vorthos community. It's a simple question, but when asked, it would change the entire history of MTG Story. What if the Eldrazi Titan Emrakul was completed by the Elesh Norn-led New Phyrexians when she led her March of the Machine across the multiverse? Before we begin though, if you're enjoying the content here at the Aether Hub, consider supporting the channel by leaving it a like, becoming a subscriber or a member, and sharing it with your friends. It all goes a long way in helping to grow our community. And now, let's get back to the video. First, let me begin by stating the obvious, that all of this is just theory crafting. It's not canon or official to the story of Magic the Gathering. That being said, there's something intriguing when thinking about the possibility of the Phyrexians completing an Eldrazi Titan. The idea of this huge force of nature, devourer of planes, monster from the realm between realms, all dripping in glistening oil, its tentacles replaced by mechanized appendages. Rather than consuming a plane of its mana, the Phyrexianized Eldrazi would spew the black sludge of corruption all over, bringing them into the One, the hive mind under Elesh Norn. Certainly, a completed Eldrazi Titan would prove to both be the Praetor's most valuable weapon and her most impressive achievement. Without a doubt, with something like Emrakul on a leash, Elesh Norn would become an unstoppable force that would have seen the entire multiverse brought to heel under her, the One's, glory. But could this crazy, hypothetical event even take place? For this what if to take place, we must first answer the tricky question of whether or not an Eldrazi Titan could even be completed by glistening oil in the first place, let alone something as big and otherworldly as Emrakul, the largest of the Eldrazi Titans. Remember, Emrakul is a being of unknown composition and unknown origins, a creature born in the blind eternities, whose form is not only gigantic but almost ethereal. Can Emrakul even be completed? We can start by looking at these two forces head to head and see if they would be compatible. Would Emrakul be fit for corruption? Well, in a gameplay sense, yeah. Emrakul or any Eldrazi Titan would be incredibly susceptible to completion. At their very core, all Phyrexians are colorless machines. Now, it's true that many new Phyrexians have adopted mana colors and alignments, but this is a result of further adaptation and incorporating their victims into the hive mind. At their base, completion is a colorless process that's based on machinery and artificy. And that fits perfectly with the Eldrazi and Emrakul, who are children of the Void, and are themselves colorless. It may be a small thing, but Phyrexians and Eldrazi both being based in colorless mana means there's a chance that Emrakul could at least be completed. While the mind of an Eldrazi Titan isn't well documented, and their purpose still remains uncertain, we do know a bit about how they operate, and this again fits scarily well with the Phyrexians. Eldrazi Titans like Emrakul travel the blind eternities looking for planes to devour. To do this, they send out legions of drones to scour the land and corrupt denizens to then serve the Eldrazi in the destruction of their own plane. They too corrupt, much like the Phyrexians, bending wills to their own and forcing individuals to obey the calls of One. If that sounds familiar, then you're right. It's the exact plan of attack for Phyrexia, to bring all those under the one, conscripting them into this hive mind, and, in this case, in service of Elesh Norn. So while we may not know much about Emrakul's motivations, it seems there's at least some operational compatibility with New Phyrexia there, meaning Emrakul would have at least been susceptible to completion. At the end of the day, glistening oil's ability to corrupt something and turn them into a Phyrexian all comes down to biology. Anything living, organic, and mortal, glistening oil can bind to, and while we don't know much about Emrakul's physical biology, we do know at least one thing, that Eldrazi Titans can be killed. When two other Eldrazi Titans, Kozilek and Ulamog, were released on the plane of Zendikar, the newly formed Gatewatch had two options on how to deal with them. Try to imprison them again, which time after time proved to only be a temporary stay in their devouring of the world, or destroy them. Ugin, the most knowledgeable planeswalker on this topic, didn't even know if the Titans could be killed, let alone what consequences their deaths would have for the multiverse at large. As such, he cautioned against such an action. The Gatewatch, being arrogant, disregarded these warnings and lured in the true physical forms of the Eldrazi Titans down from the Blind Eternities onto Zendikar. Kozilek and Ulamog were bound, and with an entire plane's worth of mana surging through them, subsequently imploded to death. On the heads of all Zendikarians rained down chunks of flesh that had once been the two Eldrazi Titans, the first of record to ever be killed. Ugin took a bunch of these globlets of flesh and retreated to research them, but not before giving the Gatewatch a good scolding. With this story, we can confirm that the Eldrazi Titans, at least as we see them in the physical realm, can be killed, which means they are in some way alive, which by extension means they're probably capable of completion. Emrakul, like its fallen brothers, is made of flesh and can be destroyed. It is mortal and organic in nature. So yes, I believe firmly Emrakul can be Phyrexianized. But while I believe she can be completed, it's still a good idea to have at least some kind of comparison to other large creatures who actually have undergone the process and survived. While we don't have many other analogs to compare Emrakul to, there are at least a few relatively similar completions that leans to this being something possible in the lore. To me, one of the greatest examples of the totally corrupting power of the glistening oil, the substance which creates new thralls of New Phyrexia, is the completion of the sun god Heliod on the plane of Theros. As Elesh Norn marched her campaign across the multiverse, her invasion found root on the plane of Theros, a world dominated by gods that, up to this point, seemed immortal and incorruptible. Most of the pantheon simply followed their own whims, corrupt in their own rights, but none had ever fallen to an outside influence before. They seemed to be untouchable by those of the mortal realm. And despite illusions of grandeur, Phyrexians are mortal beings, just machines living in a state of undeath. Now, with the completion of Heliod, I don't want to make a direct comparison to how the completion of Emrakul would go. Heliod was a special case, given the way the gods of Theros are formed. Rather than corrupting the god directly, the Phyrexians completed Heliod's devout followers. Gods on Theros take on the personification of that which their believers worship. Heliod was the god of the sun, but after his church's completion, their warped worship of Heliod twisted the god into this Phyrexianized version, and that, I admit, wouldn't work on Emrakul, and that's despite the fact that Emrakul is often worshipped as a god. Still, Heliod is probably one of the biggest things completed by the Phyrexians. It's not really known the size of the individual gods in Theros' pantheon, but it's said they can expand across the starry sky of Nyx, the realm of the gods, that covers the entirety of the mortal realm. Still, even if they take on a purely physical form, Heliod was massive in size. Probably smaller, maybe even a lot smaller than an Eldrazi Titan like Emrakul, but it still shows us that really, really big things, even not technically living things, can be completed, which adds to the argument that Emrakul 2 could be completed. To me, it was actually the ingenuity Elesh Norn employed when completing Heliod that leads me to believe that New Phyrexia could have pulled off completing Emrakul as well. Though Heliod's form couldn't be corrupted, going after his followers that in turn completed the god was some really solid planning, as Emrakul shares a lot of unknowns with gods like Heliod, especially when it comes to the completion process. I believe if the Praetors of New Phyrexia could find a way to complete Heliod, they would eventually find a way to complete Emrakul. This scientific aptitude rests squarely on the shoulders of the blue Praetor, Jin-Gitaxias. It was thanks to his tireless efforts that the New Phyrexians found new and terrifying ways to incorporate glistening oil into new hosts, and truly perfected the completion process. This is how we got our first ever Phyrexian planeswalkers, who were originally immune to the effects of glistening oil. Jin-Gitaxias pioneered a new operational standard that delicately corrupted the souls of planeswalkers without extinguishing their fragile sparks. This meant they would join the one in metallic undeath, but retain their ability to planeswalk, making them incredibly valuable assets in their mission to spread their infection across the multiverse. As Emrakul is a creature of the Blind Eternity and acts sort of like a planeswalker with her ability to traverse different planes, it would take this level of ingenuity in order to complete the Eldrazi. But I trust Jin-Gitaxias would measure up to the challenge, as the Praetor had so many times before. Now that we believe Emrakul could be completed, let's discuss how she would be completed. As Emrakul is apparently made of organic flesh and has some level of higher thinking, indicative of a living being, I'll cite her little mental chat with Jace Beleren as an example of that, I suspect that Emrakul's completion process would look very similar to the same process that corrupts everything else. Glistening oil would seep into Emrakul's very being, soaking through flesh, tendrils, and even her eerie purple glowing eye. It would spread through her system, taking much longer than the normal process because of her enormous size, but eventually diluting whatever thought process she once had, replacing it all with the will of the One, the will of New Phyrexia, and their unending mission to bring all into their singularity. All will be one. Emrakul is now complete. While that seems simple enough, Elesh Norn would first need to know about Emrakul in order to pull this off. Luckily, the Praetors of New Phyrexia would have access to individuals with some of the most personal knowledge of the Eldrazi Titans, and more specifically, Emrakul. Both the Planeswalkers Tamiyo and Jace Beleren would become completed while fighting against the March of the Machine. They are now willing agents of New Phyrexia. Because of the unique process used in completing Planeswalkers, Tamiyo and Jace both had access to their memories, including everything they knew from previous encounters with Emrakul. It was Tamiyo who cast the final spell that trapped Emrakul within the moon of Innistrad, the last plane the Eldrazi tried to consume. And it was Jace who had a mental conversation with a manifestation of Emrakul during their epic battle to save Innistrad. They both have deep knowledge of this Eldrazi Titan, knowledge that would be invaluable to Elesh Norn. As the arms of her invasion tree pierced the fabric of reality throughout the multiverse, one of the branches descends on the dark world of Innistrad. Not shocked by the local werewolves, vampires, and monsters, the Phyrexians begin to complete everything that stood in their path. Though for the denizens of Innistrad, this was not their first invasion by some otherworldly force. Years prior, they also suffered under the Eldritch Moon, the Eldrazi Titan Emrakul, who was summoned to their plane and warped a large portion of the populace in her image. In our what-if scenario, let's say Elesh Norn was given information about Emrakul's abilities, purpose, and location by the now completed Jace and Tamiyo. Maybe Tamiyo is sent to Innistrad rather than Kamigawa to reverse the spell that she had cast to imprison Emrakul in the plane's moon. As her loyal drones deal with Innistrad's denizens, a secret mission to extract Emrakul from her slumber, or maybe funnel glistening oil into the moon itself, takes place. Elesh Norn is obsessed with the idea of completing a force so grand, something not bound to any one reality. It would be her crowning achievement to this point. She's blinded by ambition. It would prove to all that their righteous mission to bring all under the one is inevitable. Of course, even as Emrakul sleeps, that doesn't mean she'll be so easily won. This prize would need to be earned. But when we discuss a possible scenario where the Eldrazi fight against New Phyrexia, you have to keep in mind that New Phyrexia probably has them beat, and that's especially true for Emrakul. Back when Emrakul herself was attacking Innistrad, one of her primary opponents was the necromancer Liliana Vess. She was a powerful agent against the Eldrazi because she commanded an almost endless horde of reanimated corpses. These zombies couldn't be warped by Emrakul's maddening magic. The undead weren't affected by the pressure of her presence. They were immune to Emrakul, and thus were the perfect weapon. While Phyrexians, namely those of New Phyrexia, aren't exactly zombies, they exist in a state that's almost akin to living death. An individual is essentially replaced, both mentally and physically, with the will of Phyrexia. Organic flesh is seen as weak and is replaced with artifice, while the soul and individuality of the victim is killed off by glistening oil, again replacing it with this unending desire to serve Phyrexia's goals. To me, this makes Phyrexians the perfect fighting force against Emrakul, as Emrakul relies so much on her ability to warp the minds of her victims, crushing them with madness and warping them into willing drones. I don't think Emrakul's magic would have any effect on Phyrexians. When her mind-bending magic tries to influence a Phyrexian, it'll be met with an impenetrable loyalty to their purpose. Because it isn't an individual mind Emrakul would be trying to distort. It's the collective hive mind that all Phyrexians share. They are all in service of the One, and the One communicates through each of them. It's a tall order, even for an Eldrazi Titan, to subjugate a hive mind with millions upon millions under its sway. In that, the Phyrexians act a lot like zombies, and I believe would be superior in a fight against Emrakul. Though she would resist, sadly there wouldn't be much the Eldrazi Titan could do. Emrakul would be completed. Now, with glistening oil drenched and dripping from Emrakul's being, the Eldrazi Titan serves Elesh Norn and looks to bring the multiverse in line with her vision, that being one of unity, with all planes and all peoples bonded by a shared mind, a commonality that would end all violence and chaos. All will be one, and Emrakul would be its greatest harbinger in the March of the Machine. With a completed Eldrazi Titan on their side, Innistrad holds no chance of resisting, even with their undead scourge. Though they posed a problem for Emrakul once before, she has risen to a higher form of being. She no longer relies on simple mental assaults to subdue adversaries, as machinery allows Emrakul to be the ultimate dispensary of Phyrexian glistening oil the multiverse has ever seen. Emrakul no longer warps minds, but wraps them in the loving embrace of the One. She beckons all who gaze upon her stupendous form to join them and add their voice to their collective harmony. Before she was trapped in the moon, Emrakul's thralls uttered nonsense like Memrakul, Imrakul, and Weemrakul. They were in her image. We are Emrakul. That selfishness has been replaced by the truth of the One offered by Phyrexia, and Emrakul is simply an instrument in its grand design. How primitive the Eldrazi Titans had been before this great awakening, devouring plains for sustenance, feeding off mana. With her completion, Emrakul no longer was in need of anything, no longer wanted for that endless, undefined purpose lost in the cold, lonesome, blind eternities. The oil had granted her a new purpose. Elesh Norn would in fact use Emrakul as her flagship of invasion. Emrakul's new metal body and artificial appendages would hang down like gigantic hoses, making them perfect for distributing glistening oil across an entire plane. There would be no greater oil tanker in the multiverse. Emrakul could complete an entire plane herself in the fraction of a time it would take traditional ground troops, as we saw in the March of the Machine storyline. Emrakul's ability to traverse the blind eternities would only add to her versatility, as Elesh Norn could easily send the Eldrazi to troublesome planes where they just cannot stamp out the final vestiges of resistance. No amount of heart or will could possibly withstand the power of a completed Emrakul. When Innistrad falls, and fall it does, Elesh Norn would send Emrakul to any plane she looks to deal with quickly. Over time, so many worlds would be lost under the control of the Phyrexians that even cowardly planeswalkers who chose to run would start to find it difficult finding a still free world. With Emrakul quickening the completion process and Phyrexianized planeswalkers working to gather intel of future planes to bring into the loving embrace, the multiverse has little hopes of survival. It would truly be the end, ushered in by the greatest weapon ever conceived, magnificent, even compared to the totality that was their great progenitor Yawgmoth. His original purpose would be fulfilled. The god who had brought the Phyrexians to be, Yawgmoth would look down upon what Elesh Norn had done with pride. Though the new Phyrexians had not known of their ancient creator, his will still flows through their veins, through the oil that grants them perfection. And this, Compleated Emrakul, is the culmination of that vision cast so many years before. A multiverse free of sickness, free of war, free of weakness, with all acting as one, all will be one. Now, while I frame this as merely a what-if scenario, what if this wasn't hypothetical? What if this is a fate that could still be? Throughout this video, when discussing how Emrakul could be completed, I've mentioned that the completion process for Emrakul may take a lot longer than what we see in normal creatures, or even planeswalkers whose process is a bit more painstaking. Because of the sheer size of Emrakul, there's no telling how long it would take for the oil to fully corrupt an Eldrazi Titan. I suspect it may take a fairly long time. Who's to say that maybe the completed Tamiyo and Jace did tell Elesh Norn about Emrakul trapped within Innistrād's moon? That Elesh Norn was in fact driven to complete the Eldrazi, for even beings from the Blind Eternities must serve the One. While she attacked the terrestrial forces of Innistrad with her normal ground troops, who's to say she didn't also divert an arm of the invasion tree to penetrate the plane's moon? From there, glistening oil could be pumped directly into the cavity where Emrakul slumbered, slowly beginning to change the Titan. Now, if this process was slow enough, maybe it wasn't completed by the time Elesh Norn was defeated, and the focal point of the Phyrexian threat, New Phyrexia itself, was banished from this reality, locked away out of time and space. While this event left the remaining Phyrexians on other planes inert, unable to receive orders from the hive mind, this wouldn't necessarily be the case for a completed Emrakul. As an Eldrazi Titan, it's unknown how far this creature of the Blind Eternity can reach. They're almost ethereal in nature, forces of the multiverse who barely subscribe to the same laws of reality forced upon the rest of us. Maybe, just maybe, Emrakul could still tap into the space New Phyrexia was now locked away in, as we have yet to find anything that could escape the grasp of the Eldrazi Titans. If so, then the signals from the hive mind would still be received by Emrakul, meaning that a completed Emrakul could still function based on their original purpose, to spread Phyrexia. Only now, Emrakul would be the usher of the One, the new god of Phyrexia. Of course, this all hinges on a what if. To end this video, I want to revisit the very words of Emrakul herself, as she talks with Jace, taking the form of the angel Emeria. She attempts to explain her purpose here, as she's devouring Innistrad, and how it's not quite the right time for this plane. Quote, "This is all wrong. I am incomplete, unfulfilled. There should be blossoms, not barren resentment. The soil was not receptive. It is not my time, not yet." I thought back to this conversation when I was reading through the comments on my Eldrazi lore video, which if you haven't seen it yet, I really suggest you give it a watch. You can find it linked here or in the description below. It goes over the complete history of the Eldrazi Titans, including Emrakul, and what they bring to the MTG storyline. Anyway, one of the comments on that video, a comment by Tetris Phantom, really caught my attention. They said it was a missed opportunity not having the Phyrexians complete Emrakul during March of the Machine, because it would have been some awesome foreshadowing, years in the making, to reference Emrakul's line of being incomplete and unfulfilled. It would have been an amazing turn of events that Emrakul foresaw what was to come with Elesh Norn's invasion, and orchestrated events to keep herself tied to a single plane, willingly awaiting the coming completion. Although, that line most likely relates to Emrakul and the Eldrazi Titans' original purpose of pruning decaying planes from the multiverse, as hypothesized by Ugin. I still think it would have been an amazing tie-in with the invasion of New Phyrexia if her ultimate purpose was to be completed and then lead the completion of the multiverse. And that's gonna do it for this video, guys. But before we wrap this thing up, I want your help with something. I want to know if you enjoyed this hypothetical video, and if you're interested in seeing more like it. If so, why don't you let me know in the comments what sort of crazy what-if scenarios you want me to explore? Just let me know in the comments, and I'll consider turning it into its own video. For now, I want to thank you all so much for watching and enjoying the content. If you did, please consider supporting the channel and our efforts here by leaving the video a like, sharing it with friends, and becoming a subscriber or member of the channel. It all goes a long way in helping the community grow. And until next time, guys, see ya!